Good morning. Hello and welcome to our podcast today. My name is Myla Sanchez. I am the Senior Vice President of Marketing for BibliU. It's our pleasure and honor to welcome our guest in this episode, Dr. Malinda Daniel. Dr. Daniel is the Executive Director of Learning Innovations at South Piedmont Community College in North Carolina. Under her helm, SPCC became a finalist for the Bellwether Awards for 2 consecutive years. Now, before we get in the weeds, please allow me to congratulate you on this feat, Dr. Daniel. How does it feel having just finished the award season last week?
Good morning, and thank you. So, yes, I am Dr. Malinda Daniel. I'm the Executive Director of Learning Innovations here at South Piedmont Community College. And coming off of 2 Bellwether finalists year after year, it has been very exciting for the college as a whole. This is quite the undertaking, and just to be surrounded by other community colleges who are working tirelessly to work to serve students, that part in and of itself is not unique because I think that's what educators do. But being willing to take the time and the extra energy to go above and beyond and to share that with others has certainly been just such a blessing. And it's a direct result of our leadership here at the college being willing to consider something innovative, something different, and to think that our students deserve different, deserve better, and quite frankly, at this point, require different and better. And so it's been a whirlwind to say the least. And we are glad to have that behind us and excited to see what the future holds at the same time.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Daniel. Now let's get right to it. SPCC and BibliU have been partners since December of 2021. Dr. Daniel, can you give us some background on your role at SPCC, please?
Sure, absolutely. So, like I said, I'm the executive director of Learning Innovations, and really the goal is to think about what could be, not just consider what currently is. And so, what I mean by that is that anytime we view as an institution the opportunity to do better for our students, we go through a process of looking at solutions, vetting opportunities, and then coming up with deliberate plans for success in the college, depending on what the needs are. And so I was involved with looking at textbooks and what was and what continues to be a changing dynamic.
Um, let's give the viewers a little bit more information about SPCC and what role does the community college play in Anson County and Union County in North Carolina?
Absolutely. So we serve 2 of North Carolina's 100 counties. So South Piedmont, we serve Anson and Union County, and it's a fascinating dynamic because our counties are pretty dichotomous. So Union County is actually currently growing at 18% growth. The state average is 9%, and we are located just southeast of Mecklenburg County, which houses Charlotte, North Carolina. So we're very suburban in that sense. And then Anson County is actually currently experiencing negative 18% growth, again, with the state average being 9%. And it is an incredibly rural area. And so we definitely see different students across the board with those two areas. In addition, our college is, and we have an FTE of just over 3,200 to give you an idea, which means about 10,000 students annually curriculum. And one of the things that's fascinating is that we also not only are our students economically dispersed or they're separated, but also our students in terms of their age are very separated. We have just around half of our students are dually enrolled high school students, and the other half of our students are adult learners, so age 24 and up. And so what's interesting about that is then we have a very small population, which are the traditional college age students. But those two dichotomies means that we're constantly striving to serve that diverse student population. So we are also ethnically and racially diverse. And it's just an interesting breakdown of our students. So yes, half high school, half adult, half from roughly one of the most affluent zip codes in the state of North Carolina, the other half coming from a county where we have lots of Title I schools and are more economically disadvantaged. And it's interesting because we straddle those two worlds all the time to ensure that everything we're doing provides an equitable solution for all of our students.
That's amazing. Thank you for giving those statistics, and we'll touch on those a little bit later on because I do want to discuss the diversity in your demographics and how it affects student outcomes. Were there any other factors, any other drivers, and how did those challenges impact student success and enrollments at SPCC?
Absolutely. One of the things that we really wanted to focus on when we looked at providing resources to our students is making sure they have access day one. And that's important because you can't be successful in class without a book. The students were skipping buying their materials due to cost. And so we wanted to find ways to help them predict cost models associated with their resources. So it's one thing if you know that you're going to take a class that's 3 credits and it's going to cost you X dollars per credit, right? You can plan for that. And if you know that your program's 60 credits, you know that over the course of time, this will be the cost of your tuition. Textbooks can throw that out of the water. And we've seen studies that have shown that sometimes students end up paying as much for textbooks as they do for tuition, especially at a community college where the value and the cost of education is the value is incredibly high and the cost is incredibly reasonable. But you throw in a $400 textbook and it can throw the whole thing out of the water. So we needed that to be more predictive, and we needed to ensure that then they could have the resources first day. So if I wasn't planning for the cost, I may delay getting that book, which means I'm delaying preparing for class and or skipping it altogether. And that's not good for our students. So what we were able to do or what we were seeking to do and now have been able to do is to come up with that predictive model for cost, and we're using a flat fee. And then to also work that into a fee in the courses. And so that way, when the student registers for class and they're paying their tuition, it's built into the course. And so now that fee is covered, and there's not that additional thought that goes with it because they already know what that cost is going to be. And then being able to provide materials that are embedded into our LMS so that they are there when the class opens, that's fantastic.
That's great. So transparency of cost and predictability of cost buoys their confidence in completing their course successfully. That's really wonderful to hear. Now, let's talk about Learning Reimagined. I'm really curious about this. I'm sure our viewers are also. How did it come about, and how long did it take for SPCC to launch this?
So, Learning Reimagined ended up being a conglomeration of all sorts of initiatives where we sat down to work to overcome actually a workforce shortage in North Carolina, a workforce shortage that's across the country. So, the Lumina Foundation set up a goal to where we would have that 60% of Americans would have a worthwhile credential, a degree or a diploma. And how do we get there? Well, the answer is we get them through school. Okay. So why are they not going through school? Well, we started looking and we identified the top 4 barriers that students were identifying and saying these are the top 4 barriers on a national level that is preventing students from achieving these credentials. So whether they are stopping out, dropping out, et cetera, right? Here's the 4 major hiccups in that pipeline. So as we're looking at these, the first one is the ability to go to school, right? So work. Lots of people who would join the workforce are surprisingly working, right? So they've got work things going on. They also expressed concerns about the ability to afford to go to school. They also expressed concerns about family life work balance, right? So basically pulls on their time, right? So if you think about adult learners, and we've established that that's half of our population, and then the other part were challenges with online classes. So these were the top 4 barriers for students. And we said, okay, how do we address those? And the ultimate answer that we came up with turned into Learning Reimagined. And this is a campus wide, all hands on deck initiative that our leadership didn't just put their words behind, but also put their encouragement and financial and personnel resources in order to make this work. But we looked at the whole package. And one of the big parts about that was ensuring that our students would have the ability to go to school in a modality that would work with them because our students' lives have changed as a direct result of the pandemic. And whatever we are going back to as institutions across the country, it's never going to go back to what it was. And so we have to address our students with where they are now, not remember the good old days. We have to do something different because their lives are different than they used to be.
That's incredible. What an incredible undertaking this has been. And I did not realize that the primary driver of Learning Reimagine was workforce shortage. And kudos to you for for taking this undertaking on, to you and your team at SPCC. So last month, in Biden's State of the Union, he emphasized the importance of giving students better chances of getting a degree. And I think what you did with Learning Imagine and what you're doing with Learning Imagine is right along the lines of this. He also called community colleges the best career training in America, in addition to being a pathway to a 4-year degree. So I think you're really embodying this narrative of community colleges being the best career training in America through Learning Reimagined. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you. And I think that along the lines of that, the community college is really well positioned to help pivot quickly to respond to workforce needs. So we do a lot of workforce development here at South Piedmont that goes beyond, it has nothing to do with some of our transfer classes, which is what a lot of people think that the community college is designed to do. We also work diligently with business partners across the area to make sure that whatever their workforce needs are, that we work to meet them. And so the community college is very well situated to do that. And so I think that as we continue and go forward and we see this uptick, I think in workforce development, in training, in credentialing, in um, the trades coming back, I believe that we're going to have to lean on community colleges. And I will tell you that South Piedmont is ready to be leaned on. We're ready to help answer that call because ultimately, all people go to school to get a job, right? Whether that's through a credential, whether that is through a degree, whether that's through post-secondary degree attainment and a doctorate and whatever, right? It ultimately all leads back into the workforce. And so starting with those barriers just made sense for us.
Amazing. Now, how does BibliU fit into Learning Reimagined? Did you use any metrics to measure BibliU's impact in the program?
Yes. So we looked specifically at costs. And one of the things that's interesting is you mentioned metrics. So realistically, colleges haven't had metrics, so to speak, of actual data on student resource utilization, meaning that we could tell you how many of our students bought their books. We could tell you that 23 copies of the Norton Anthology were ordered for freshman English. I can't tell you who read it. I can't
Yeah.
tell you how often the faculty members cited it. I can't tell you how much time our nursing students were spending in their textbooks until we got BibliU. So realistically, the metrics, the analytics, this is something new. And so in the fall of 2022, we went college-wide with BibliU, and we ended up with all of this data. Now we're going to have to decide what do we do with it and what does it mean? And one of the first things that it did is it allowed us the chance. So we just submitted now for our next fall book orders. And what we were able to do was to look at last fall, so fall of 2022, look at what we thought we were going to use for fall of 2023, and look and make sure that the resources were being utilized. Right? And so now we've got this data and we're still trying to figure out what does it mean? What do we do with it? And so the metrics were super important. And we now have a solid baseline, but now we have to figure out what does that mean for going forward. Because at a certain point, we want to ensure that all of the resources we are requesting our students to use, that it makes sense for them to utilize it. And quite frankly, no faculty have ever had that. And I suspect what we're going to be able to find soon, and which we think we know, but right now we've got a group of people on campus that are going through and looking at textbook usage or material usage, OER usage, courseware usage, et cetera, through BibliU and rate distribution.
And it sounds like the analytics that you're able, or the data you're able to gather in the BibliU dashboard will enable you to further evolve learning Reimagine and recalibrate where needed.
Absolutely. And it's an exciting new world, right?
Yeah.
With all of this opportunity and also trying to make sure that while we're doing, one of the things about learning reimagined is we could have easily have gone off the deep end and just changed absolutely everything. And at the same time, opened up new opportunities for barriers for our students. And so I think the other thing is that we're trying to toe the line to make sure that we're using all of the data to be helpful, using all the new tools to be helpful, but also not putting in anything that's going to hamper the success of our students. And so being mindful of that, especially with the course design and um, just trying to ease access. Our students still have the ability to download their books. They actually have the ability to get their books read to them now when they're going back and forth to school. They have the ability to make highlights, to share, hyperlink areas of their books in conversations in their learning management system. So they can look at their faculty members and be like, hey, I didn't understand this, right? Or they could take a snippet of it and then they can show that, or they can create the link or make the comments and share those directly with their faculty members. What we're doing is providing them a chance to really get integrative learning through their course materials, whether that be an OER, right, or whether that be a textbook. I mean, you think about the OER platform and the faculty that now have the ability to have that embedded to their class instead of sending their students to, all countless different links out on the internet, which is fine. But for some of our students who are depending on hotspots or who are downloading all their materials to be able to work from home, and then when they come back to campus, they upload everything, they can't be going all over the place, right? Because there's some areas where we don't have broadband. And so the ability for them to have all of that, or we've got some students that have no intention of ever coming to campus. And so getting their textbooks was going to be an additional barrier, right? Or they were going to have to buy them on their own through Amazon and thus not be covered under financial aid. I mean, the list goes on of all of these things. We have decreased the barrier to make that easier for them.
That's great. That's great perspective. You mentioned OER a few times already. How important is OER to SPCC and why?
Open educational resources give our faculty the opportunity to curate their own resource using free materials to set up their students for success and to bring in these things that they believe really add oomph to the class. By providing it through BibliU, I am able then to do that same embedding into the class and to put it in that iframe reader that's already in our we use Canvas as our LMS, but it's already in there. I can link to it. I could put in the comments. I could have all of this in one place so my students don't have to go and find it. And so that's very important, I think, to our faculty. Faculty choice with regards to materials has been paramount to this entire project, because we're not in the business of telling the faculty what to teach or how to teach it. The faculty members are subject matter experts. And when we were reconsidering ways to make predictive cost models and to keep the cost lower, but have excellent materials for our faculty or for our students, we weren't interested in any of the solutions that limited that. And so that was really one of the things, the increase in OER that we were already experiencing. I mean, it's amazing, but one of the best resources that has been utilized since we started BibliU, going to the analytics that we could look at, is actually an OER for a freshman English class that our faculty worked together to curate. And so that's the number one resource that was used by our students. And that makes sense. It's a high impact course. Lots of students take freshman English. But also, it's a huge testament to the faculty that they can see, like, hey, they're reading what we've assigned. They are using the materials that we have given them. This is working, right? So the student learning outcomes are hitting the metrics that they need to hit. And we see that the students are using the resource. So it's nice to get that response, I think, for our faculty.
That's amazing. And I think that's an area that where BibliU and SPCC share a common goal, is to make sure that faculty have the academic freedom to choose the content for their courses. We fully support that also. Now, we've been talking about, or you mentioned the demographics of your student body. Let's elaborate on that a little bit more. What percent of your student body are dual credit students, and how are you supporting those students?
Sure. So roughly half of our student body are dual enrollment, meaning that they're still high school students who are also taking advantage of community college classes. Here in North Carolina, we have a program called Career and College Promise that allows for high school students to take college classes once they've met certain thresholds at no cost to them. And so what's been really nice about that is that now some of our students who weren't planning on coming to campus to get resources because they may still be based out of their high school, right? Because they're still high school students. They don't have to. And so that's been very nice. Also, the cost predictive model helps a lot with the county who's ultimately taking care of the cost for the students' books uh, and their resources. So they're appreciating, right, that they can budget because I don't know that educational budgets are expanding at quite the rate that educational costs are. And so it works very well for them to have the opportunity to have, again, that cost predictive model, resources available day one, that sort of thing. So it really, it's still some of those same barriers that we're looking to overcome throughout all of our projects still impact our high school students.
Okay, good. Thank you. And you mentioned also that the other half of your student body are adult learners. How are you supporting these students? They have unique needs themselves.
Sure. So our adult learners, what we have found is that from ages 25 to 44, this has worked incredibly well. There's a slight dip over 44 from Learning Reimagined, and we believe that's because we collectively have put such a large emphasis on technology to help facilitate the education. And so we expected that, and we are working specifically with those students by embedding additional resources, ensuring that we have technology. We actually have a whole tech commons down here at the college where people can meet either in person or virtually, right? Because that's high flex as well. Watch some videos, but we've tried very hard to ensure, again, that equity in experience. But we found that most of our students, they bend, they're flexy. The world flexed for them, right? And so there's no preconceived notion now of what the normal educational experience is going to look like. And our students aren't expecting the world to go back to normal, kind of in the same way that we have realized it's just not going to. So I would almost say that our adult students, they stopped out right from their education. Many of them, they became teachers, right, of middle school and high school and elementary age students. They became, caretakers when they realized that they weren't going to go back to work. They had to go find new careers, which is why they maybe tried to come back to school. I mean, I think people in general, we've all become more malleable. And as a result of that, they just go along with the malleability of education.
There have been studies that show almost half of community college students are from low income families, somewhere around 42%. And students from low income backgrounds are less likely to earn a degree. What percent of your student body are from this demographic, and how is the institution helping bridge that gap to a degree?
So when you look at the student demographics and you look at students, whether they're receiving Pell Grants or not receiving Pell Grants, that's generally how we can look and talk about student need, right? And financial aid, whether or not they are completing the FAFSA. I mean, all of those numbers then show, right, where the student is at economically. Having said that, one of the barriers that we really looked at, right, when we were trying to come up with Learning Reimagined and we were going down this whole road, really had to do then with helping decrease the barrier based on work, right? So that students could flex their time and attend classes so that they could go to work to earn the money so they weren't having to decide between work and education. We want them to be able to do both. We want to make sure that then they understand what the costs are going to be. So I think all of this goes back to that same model of predictability and
Yeah.
flexibility. And that's how we really work to help serve these student populations, is doing our best to make sure they don't have to choose. You don't have to choose between working and being a student, because a lot of our students have had to in the past. In addition, we've been trying very hard, and that's part of the reason that we went to the model where it's a flat fee that is built in as a fee into the courses so the students don't have to additionally think about it, and it works with their financial aid should they be receiving Pell Grants or other forms of assistance here at the college. We're expected, community colleges in general are expected to still see that growth. The kicker is, are we retaining our students and are they successfully completing what they're here for? And that's where we have started to work. Getting students in the door has not historically been an issue. It's making sure that they achieve whatever their goal is. And so one of the things that we're working very hard on is to redefine how we're defining student success. So if it is a single course, right? If they're coming in, we have a class here that allows for our students to then become preschool teaching assistants, and it's a single course. If that's the goal, and they come in and they achieve that goal, we should define that as success. If the goal is for them to come in and receive whatever credential, then when they achieve that credential, that's success. If they are a student that's home for the summer and they need to pick up a biology 2 class before they go back to their 4-year in the fall, if they achieve the goal of completing that course, that should be success. And so one of the things that we're going to continue to reimagine and to work on defining is student success. And we need to start defining it based on the students and not based on the institution. We can help overcome so many barriers. And by the same means, we're going to have to then define success based on whatever their goals are, not necessarily what our goals are for them.
It's really quite impressive that in everything that you do, student success is at the heart of it.
Well, and thank you. I think that comes from our leadership. And I don't think that that's unique necessarily to South Piedmont. We're definitely doing this, but that's the goal of education, is student success. And I think that we are all in a point where we have to redefine that. I just think that our leadership here is willing to say it and willing to get behind it, and that we're willing to reimagine what this could look like. And we have faculty who are willing to bend over backwards and complete Herculean lifts and changes here at the institution that are astounding by any means. And when doing the right thing for the student is at the soul of the institution, you can't go wrong, right? And that doesn't mean that it's easy, and it doesn't mean that it's pretty, and it doesn't mean that there's not hiccups along the way. And we collectively as a team figure them out and go forward. And my goodness, what a difference that makes. But it is from the top to the bottom. Everybody across the board has been, let's do this and let's figure it out. And every time it gets a little hairy or a little uncomfortable, the conversation goes back to, but is this what's right for the students? And if the answer is yes, then we figure it out and go forward.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.